From the CyberHub bunker and studio, you're tuning in to the CyberHub Podcast. And now for your host and CISO, James Azar.
Good morning, security gang. Welcome to another episode of the CyberHub Podcast, Wednesday, October 23rd, 2024. Packed show for all of y'all today. Really, like a lot of really good stories. We're going to deep dive into those here in just a moment. But before we do that, join me for a coffee cup cheers. I've got my double espresso here, which I absolutely love to share with all of y'all every single morning when we do this show. Coffee cup cheers, gang. So we're going to be talking about TikTok today. We're going to be talking about the SEC and just what I like to call blackmail in a way. We're also going to talk about several ZeroDays, some vulnerabilities, and a few annual reports that should kind of help us all get a better grasp as to kind of the state of the industry. So there's that. Good morning from Austin, Texas, one of my favorite places on the planet. And the Security Institute, which is, if you're not a part of, go check it out right now. It really is a unbelievable place for you to get started in cyber and understand the basics of what you need. So go check out the Security Institute. Thanks for tuning in this morning. By the way, on my Substack yesterday, I dropped the highly anticipated President Donald J. Trump versus Vice President Kamala Harris. Where do they stand on cybersecurity? We examined their records. We examined their websites for policy. We've reached out. Some have commented, some have not. That article is fully available for you on our Substack, absolutely free. Just go subscribe, jamesazar.substack.com. Maybe it'll help sway you in one way or another and help you understand a little bit more how these two candidates differ, or are they the same on cyber? You'll have to go read that article to find out. Let's go ahead and get started with the SEC settling finally with 4 different tech companies. Those are Avaya Holdings, Checkpoint, Mimecast, and Unisys, over allegations that they allegedly misled investors about the extent of the impacts of the 2020 SolarWinds data breach. Now, mind you, these companies were customers of SolarWinds, and SolarWinds may have used some of their technology, and allegedly what the SEC claims is that they misled investors about the material impact of SolarWinds. However, all of the companies say we really didn't have one. And when you look at their financial reports, you don't see it. However, don't put it behind a regulatory body to just for years weigh you down in legal fees to get you to pay for something. Unisys paid a $4 million penalty, while Checkpoint, Mimecast, and Avaya each paid about $1 million. Now, they didn't admit any wrongdoing, nor should they if there wasn't any wrongdoing. The breach itself was significant. There's no doubt about it. However, is the SEC overstepping here like they are with their action against Tim Brown, the CISO at SolarWinds? In 2 of these cases, they say the risk factors were framed hypothetically or generically, but when the companies knew or warned of the risk that had already materialized, according to the SEC acting chief of SEC's crypto assets and cyber unit, a gentleman by the name of Jorge Tenerero. Gil Messing, the chief of staff over at Checkpoint, said the company didn't find any evidence that any customer data, code, or sensitive information was accessed, so it's not material. Yet they still had to pay $1 million fine. Mimecast said they've made extensive disclosures. They engaged with customers. They were proactive. They were transparent. Even with those that were unaffected, they looked at all the disclosure obligations. Again, they say that. Avaya, on the other hand, a bit more, I'd like to say, presidential. They've been pleased to resolve the blackmail done by the SEC on Avaya. And the agency recognized Avaya's voluntary cooperation. I gotta tell you, like, this just is bottom line agitating, and here's why. So from a practitioner perspective, I go, great, this is another thing I can take to my executive team to get them to pay more attention to cyber. And if that's your thought process, you're 100% true, 100% correct. However, there's a general idea here that we're continuing to punish the victims of the crime and not the perpetrators. Here's what the SEC action here tells me is if you're a victim of a crime and you don't believe that you suffered a material breach, I'm still going to investigate you and I'm still going to squeeze you for money. And if you like those actions by the government, then by all means, go for it. But it's an overstep in every single possible way. The companies that experience these actions, unless they're gross negligence, meaning they just don't do anything in cyber or they do it so very poorly, there's no reason to fine them. They've already spent hard-earned money on doing this. And if you wonder why markets stagnant, if you wonder why companies' profitability may or may not increase as fast, this is the reason why. I mean, this kills business. These 4 companies can withstand. They probably made more for their lawyers since that breach than they did paying the SEC. And yet again, we're at it again. I mean, we just don't learn. All right, we continue with TikTok. And China's based parent company Byte apparently firing an intern for sabotaging a training session about AI. And what we mean by a training session is apparently he sabotaged their AI training model. The intern was let go in August after having maliciously interfered, that's their words, not mine, on a research project to train AI models. The intern involved maliciously interfered with the model training tasks of the commercial technology, didn't affect anything allegedly. However, rumors have it, and I have it on good account, that it's in the tens of millions of dollars. That essentially what this intern did is completely sabotage their AI training model. So there's that for ByteDance to contend with. You know, chickens come home to roost every now and then. ByteDance every now and then. But again, the insider threat there is significant. You have to understand that, and when you're bringing in people to work on specific projects, you ought to be able to do a more thorough background check. I mean, that's kind of the lesson you take out of it. Additionally, you really want to do good. You know, if people are working on at sensitive companies like ByteDance, or if you feel like you work at a very sensitive organization, you want to ensure that the views of the people you hire align with your mission. Otherwise, you may find yourself in a similar situation. A zero-day vulnerability in Samsung's mobile processors is being leveraged as part of an exploit chain for arbitrary code execution, according to Google's TAG team. That's the threat analysis group. The CVE assigned is 2024-44068. It's only got a CVSS score of 8.1, and it was patched as part of Samsung's October 2024 patch release. The issue is described as a use after free bug that could be abused to escalate privileges on a vulnerable Android device. The issue was discovered in the M2M scaler driver in the Samsung mobile processor and wearable processor Exynos 90820, 90825, 90880, 90990, 850, and W920. The use after freeing the mobile processor leads to privilege escalation, according to Google's TAC team. Samsung made a scarce advisory on it, makes no mention of the vulnerability's exploitation, but Google researcher Zhengyao Jin, who was credited with reporting the flaw, warns that an exploit does exist in the wild. So there's that. If you haven't patched that or you haven't updated, you want to make sure to get that done ASAP. CISA, for their end, are warning about CVE 2024-38094. This is Microsoft's SharePoint vulnerability that was recently patched, addressing a remote code execution vulnerability. Now there's a active exploit in the wild for this specific CVE. According to CISA, an authenticated attacker with site owner permissions can use the vulnerability to inject arbitrary code and execute the code in the context of a SharePoint server. According to Qualys, the bug resembles CVE 2024-38024, which can be exploited using a specialized API request to trigger deserialization of the file's parameters. So you want to make sure you get that SharePoint issue addressed. Again, go check out our Substack, jamesazar.substack.com. All the latest stories there. Don't miss out. We'll continue with NotLockBit, because that's how creative we are with name calling. Like, we're just creative. So a new macOS malware family that's capable of encrypting files pretending to be LockBit ransomware is making its rounds, according to several security researchers. The malware itself is written in Go. It's targeting both Windows and Mac OS system. The threat employs similar tactics to ransomware operations. It's stealing victim data for double extortion. It's encrypting files. It's deleting shadow copies to prevent data recovery. What makes the new malware family stand out from the crowd is its impersonation of LockBit. According to Sentinel-1, which calls it NotLockBit, the malware is distributed as an x86_64 binary, suggests it only works on Intel and Apple Silicon Mac OS devices running the Rosetta emulation software. The threat was seen harvesting system information upon execution using a public key to encrypt a randomly generated master key that's used during the file encryption process. They're relying on RSA asymmetric encryption. The threat actor ensures that the master key cannot be decrypted without the attacker held private key. NotLockBit appends all of their extensions by .abcd to the encrypted file. It drops the ransom note and replaces the desktop wallpaper to display a LockBit 2.0 wallpaper. So all in all there, according to Sentinel-1, NotLockBit appears to be the first functional ransomware family targeting Mac OS. As previously observed, attempts were mere proof of concept samples. This one actually is live. So something to keep your eye out for on your Mac OS devices, and partner with your security operations team and your MDR, XDR partner in terms of addressing and making sure you've got that covered, especially if you have Mac OS in your environment. So there's that. We'll move on to SANS releasing their ICS 2024 and OT cybersecurity report. It's named the State of Operational Technology and Cybersecurity in 2024. SANS surveyed 530 professionals in critical infrastructure and found that while detection capabilities have improved, many organizations still don't have an effective incident response plan. The number of detected non-ransomware incidents went up 19% compared to 2023, with the plurality, I can't talk. All right. Most initial attack vectors coming from an IT vulnerability that allowed attackers to penetrate an OT IT networks. 46% of the attacks originated in that way, with the second most common vector at 24 coming into an OT network through an external remote service. Ransomware remains a major threat. While there's been a slight decline in ransomware attacks, 38% of respondents reported that ransomware impacted the safety or reliability of their physical processes. One very interesting thing in the report, by the way, and you can find the link in the show notes, is what were some of the priorities. And if you take a look at the priorities ranked by kind of what's most important, safety of the industrial process and facility ranks at the very top, followed by confidentiality of IP, and then preventing the company from financial loss, closely tied with reliability and availability of the industrial process. And look where compliance ranks in OT. Number 5. Now, if you work in an industry that might meet regulatory compliance, might be at the top, not number 5, but it's number 5 here. And I thought that was very telling of how cybersecurity is viewed in the utilities and in industrial in the industrial world, because it really is something to be absolutely mindful of when you look at those kind of priorities. The report's great. Jason Christopher of SANS did a whole webinar on it. If you catch about the first 40 minutes, you'll get everything you need. The rest of it is just panels with some cybersecurity vendors that kind of do their own little presentation. Some of it is sales, some of it is actually on point. But if you want to go check out that webinar, you can. We'll drop that link in the show notes there as well. 2 Russian hacking groups leveled DDoS attacks against Japanese logistics and shipbuilding firms, as well as government and political information, in what many believe is a pressure campaign on the Japanese government by their Russian neighbor. The attacks came after lawmakers boosted the nation's defense budget and its military conducted exercise with many regional allies. The 2 pro-Russian cyber threat groups, No Name 057 and the Russian Cyber Army team, started attacking Japanese targets on October 14th, with more than half of the attacks targeting logistics, shipbuilding, and manufacturing firms. According to NetScout, the groups, especially No Name 057, had made a name for themselves by attacking Ukrainian and European targets following Russia's invasion of Ukraine. The groups targeted Japanese industry and government agencies after the Ministry of Foreign Affairs of the Russian Federation expressed concern over the ramp-up of Japan's military. Well, Japan's a sovereign country. If they want to ramp up their military, they can. They're also next door neighbors to China, and I'd rather Japan have a military than sending our boys to go fight it. So there's that. So so the China-Russia kind of geopolitical rivalries are heating up. By the way, I mean, they may seem like they're getting along and they're shaking hands and they're talking bricks, but they're only talking bricks within their own little circle of trade of nations that are being sanctioned. And they're trying to kind of build a plateau off of sanctions for countries that may want to do business with BRICS nations or organizations that are under sanctions but don't want to deal with U.S. sanctions. Essentially what that is, right? So Japan government, for their end, aren't coming off of this. They're saying we're going to continue to do this. You can try to do all the DDoS and anything else you want to do, but we're going to, again, continue to defend our country and continue to build our own independent army, which they should do. Final story of the day is Cyber Command 2.0 is getting ready to relaunch after a internal study found that the Cyber Command's got to update itself and revamp itself to combat future cyber threats. It's got to streamline partnerships with industry and envision a new system for how the military service recruits and retains its talents. It's overhauling its own hiring practices according to an extensive internal review. The review was meant to meet various requirements that lawmakers have inserted into the defense policy bills in recent years. It comes as some of Capitol Hill's have grown so frustrated with the command's readiness woes and inability to attract and keep personnel that they favor the idea of creating an independent cyber service on par with other armed services. That's the bill that's currently, it's not going to go through. Obviously, we're in the midst of an election cycle, but something that's being actively discussed in Congress is removing Cyber Command as a cross function of the branches of the military and creating its own branch. And then that way they wouldn't have issues recruiting and funding and doing so forth. And there is a big difference between being in like Army Cyber Command to Navy to Air Force. There's Coast Guard. There's a difference. And so maybe creating one force might actually come in as extremely helpful. This is kind of the vision going forward to what this looks like. The conclusion of the appraisals, which have been shared with Deputy Defense Secretary Kathleen Hicks and Michael Solomire, according to sources, could change. But now there's 5 core tenets: establish a warfare innovation center, set up a talent management task force, create a new force generation model within the military branches, form an advanced cyber training center, and follow the 5 pillars of readiness. So we'll see how that works for Cyber Command. That's it for our show this morning. We'll be back tomorrow, 9 a.m. Eastern, live with all the latest and greatest. Until then, thank you all for tuning in. Have a great rest of your day. Make sure to subscribe, follow, share, comment below. We'll get to some of those questions we couldn't get to on the show here in the comments after. Till then, stay cyber safe.
We love feedback, so make sure to connect with us on social media and subscribe to our podcast on your favorite podcast listening platform.